Well, on the back of that Brexit debate, what does nationality mean? As humans, do we really belong to a nation more than another? Can this change? Well, having studied mathematics right up to PhD level, photographer Ed Alcock turned his attention to examining subjects that are perhaps harder to calculate. Feelings and a sense of belonging. Born in the United Kingdom, but living in France since the turn of the century, you have said that England is a lie and that you now feel excluded from your home country. You have two collections, Mr. Alcock, that are currently on show here in France. If we may, we might start with the Home Sweet Home one, which was a collection born out of this Brexit referendum. I believe even the day after the results of that vote fell, you set off straight for the UK and wanted to do a road trip through the rural areas.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the idea was, waking up on the 24th of June 2016 and thinking, oh God, sort of, what does this mean? And I suppose two things I did immediately. First thing, call Le Monde, a newspaper I work for a lot here, and asked them, tell them that I wanted to do this road trip. I wanted to do a journey across the UK from Scotland down to the southwest and from Wales back towards London, but stopping before London. And the other thing I did, which was go online and check how one becomes French, which was sort of the other important thing to do that day to remain European. So yeah, we left on, I think it wasn't the day after, it was perhaps 2 days later, I can't remember exactly, myself and a journalist from Le Monde, and did that trip and stopped in small villages, small towns, to talk to people who were essentially not just Brexiters, but the idea was really to talk to the people who hadn't had much of a voice during the run-up to the referendum. I think had the feeling that a lot of the media, whether it be British or more international, had talked with people in the metropolitan areas. A lot of people in London, perhaps in Manchester, not so much in the small villages and towns, and so we wanted to get their voice, really.
Okay, and what was their voice? I mean, was it, a vote out of fear? What was their motivation?
Well, their voice is what, of course, now, 3 years later, we've heard a lot, so it doesn't seem that original anymore. But it was that sense of having been forgotten, being cut off, that sense of division between the people and the elite.
But you did do an interesting thing, however, because you went, in the days following that referendum result, you went back after the general elections of 2017, and you're planning to go back again if and when the UK actually leaves the EU. But already in the divide between the first and second visit, had feelings changed?
I always feel like I have to be a little bit careful because there's always a danger when you know perfectly well, when you're talking to people, especially when it's a subject that you really care about personally, there's always a risk of projecting your own feelings onto what you think you're hearing. And I suppose I wanted to believe, actually particularly for, him, Brian, I wanted to believe that I was starting to hear some doubt. I'm not sure it's the case. I think there was perhaps more a sense of realism that was creeping in. We were perhaps going beyond the bravado of, this grand isle will defend the beaches, and sort of going into something, a bit more of a sort of stiff upper lip situation where
we've done it, but we'll manage it.
We've done it. It's going to be hard, but it's for the best.
But tell me, Mr. Alcock, because time is passing so fast, but the interesting thing is your original project moved on from that newspaper report, and in fact, you made it into a documentary series, a magazine-style thing, by juxtaposing the pictures you took during your trip with a book from France from 50 years ago or something, all about Britain.
This little book that I found on a bookcase in a second-hand bookshop, called Collection England, and despite the English title, it's actually for French school kids, or was for French school kids in the 1950s. So it's the same time as the creation, not of the European Union, but of the ECC. And I suppose it sort of gives a portrait of the UK, or England more precisely, from a French point of view. And I wanted to juxtapose my vision as an expatriate with that French vision 50 years earlier, sort of beginning and end of Britain's part of being in the Union. And what's curious is how much resonance there is between the two moments.
How similarities and how things have moved on. Because indeed, even your exhibition, you say you want the viewer to decide what they think of Britain today. Have you been getting feedback from it?
You get different kinds of feedback. I mean, it depends obviously very much who's looking at it, whether it's Brits looking at it or French people looking at it or other Europeans, because it's a European festival, so all sorts of different photographers and different visitors.
One thing that struck me, one of the portraits you did was of a man called Tom from Bradford.
Right.
And it struck me at how much I judge people by the image, deciding, you know, whether or not I think they're Brexit or Remain. Did you get a feeling of that from people?
Well, I mean, I got a feeling from it myself. I mean, and you know, the reason I stopped Tom in the street was because he's got a shaved head. He's got, I think his nose is a bit busted. He's got sort of, you know, he looks like he's just come out of a fight. And I suppose I thought, brilliant, perfect Brexiter. I'll talk to him immediately. And of course, he was a Remainer, and he was furious. About
Reflecting
what
our
had happened.
prejudices as well.
Reflects our prejudice, my prejudice, and there he is, Tom. Hi, Tom. What was curious, really, was that his father voted Brexit. And so the two were, at that time at least, are no longer on speaking terms.
Indeed, a lot of families divided. But just because we're sadly running out of time, your main work is a lot of portraits here. We've seen a few of them flash up throughout the series here. And one, I have to say, stopped me in my tracks. It's of the French President Emmanuel Macron. What a beard. Tell me the backstory there.
Ah, the beard. It was, I think he was still Minister of the Economy. It was 2016. It was just after Christmas. It was like the first or second day back after the Christmas break, and he hadn't bothered yet to shave his beard. And he granted an interview with Le Monde again, and so I think I'm probably the only person with a portrait of the president bearded.
I think it's a sign that you've fully integrated with the French. But how do you feel now having this dual nationality?
Well, relieved and pleased really to be able to participate.
But are you French or are you British? Or are you both? Is there one that takes...
That's a harder question. I guess I don't know whether one ever really becomes French, but we'll see.
Maybe in another few years, who knows?
Maybe in a few years' time.
Well, there's so much more we could talk about because you have another exhibition in Arles at the moment, the 50th edition of the Arles Festival. There's Chien et Loup, which roughly translates as dusk, but it's a lot more about that, about humans' relationship with the other animals. But people are just going to have to check that out, I'm afraid, right at the time. Mr. Ed Alcock, thanks so much for coming in to
Thank you very much.
If you're just joining us,